what if the connection that you're looking for with your son, for anyone listening, with your partner, with your parents, with your best friend, with your sister, with your coworkers, is actually way easier to get than you think? What if you just ask? Hi guys, it's Rach, and we're back for another episode of Ask Rach. If this is your first time joining the podcast ever, holy crap, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. If this is the first time you've listened to Ask Rach, allow me a moment to explain what's about to happen. What's about to happen is I'm going to play some voicemails, and this is like old school answering machine style. Listeners of the show call in from all over the world, and they ask me questions. That's why we call it Ask Rach. I'm Rach. They're about to ask. The questions are a bit of everything. I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds here from the last few years, and I never know what to expect. My team will go in and they'll grab the voicemails for me. They put them in a little doc, and then they'll just give me what the topic is. So for today's episode, sometimes I like to mix it up. I have not listened to these. So you and I are going to listen to them for the first time together. Hopefully there's nothing dirty in them, or maybe there will be, which could be exciting. But if you would like to ask a question on the Ask Rach hotline, you're going to call 737-400-4626. You call and leave a voicemail. You can leave it anonymously. You can give your name, your email address. You can do whatever you want. You can do it. But the idea is that most of the episodes of the show are shaped by me and what I'm interested in. But by doing this, I hope I'm able to talk about what you are interested in. So if there's something specifically you want to know, call in and ask. And if you haven't gone back and listened to past Ask Rach episodes, you totally should. Because what I find really interesting is there are all sorts of questions, but they're kind of 10 of the same topic, which to me is like, okay, we're all dealing with the exact same stuff. But if you don't want to call in, there's a very strong chance I might have already asked your question and then you don't have to call. Okay, so we're going to start with Cindy. We're just going to start with Cindy. Who knows what this is going to be.
Hi, Rachel. My name is Cindy. I went to your RISE conference in Fort Myers a couple years ago, and I wanted to say thank you so much. I've been a huge fan of yours. I'm calling today because I am looking for parenting advice on how to handle teenagers. I am a single mom, but I find that he spends most of his time in his room watching TV, which he's a gamer, so it turns into watching guys on YouTube playing the video games and all this stuff, and playing video games. Or watching cartoons. He goes to a private school, which is pretty demanding. He has Taekwondo, which he plays in the evening. What do I do to get quality time with him? I'm just really struggling on how to get my 11 and a half, almost 12-year-old boy to spend time with me. I don't have a playroom. I have a 2-bedroom apartment. I just want to know, I know you have boys and also a girl, but how do you get your teenagers out of their room and with the...
Okay. I love this. I love our backstory, Cindy. I love all of the detail, and I get it. I have a lot of thoughts, so forgive me. I'm going to go in no particular order about a lot of the things that you just said. First of all, I want you to hear that this is so normal. I think that there were a ton of parents listening to this episode who were nodding along with the things that you were saying. I definitely was. And we also can understand the desire to connect with our kids on a deeper level in a more meaningful way. So let's just start right at the top. Let's start with recognizing that our children are individual humans just like we are. The reason I start there is because I can also get frustrated that the kids are, wanting to be on, let's say, a phone, or they're wanting to be gaming, or they're wanting to be doing something that involves a screen. But then I think back to when I was their age. I lived in my room. And Cindy, I'd challenge you, like when you were a teenager, did you like hanging out in your room? I did. I like put the radio on. I painted my nails. I just did all sorts of stuff. And I love that he knows that he needs the time to decompress, because it sounds like his schedule, just like most of our kids' schedule these days, is so intense. He does need a moment to kind of shut his brain off. And I'll go through these waves where I get really like, oh gosh, is this going to like melt their brain that they're spending so much time? Like as soon as they get home, my teenagers they'll walk in the door, they'll put their stuff down, hi, how are you? They'll do the whole thing. And then not too long after that, they're plopped across their bed and they're watching TikTok. And there was a part of me that was really worried about what that would mean, mostly because we didn't have that when we were teenagers. When we were teenagers, we went in our room and we did stuff, but we didn't necessarily go in our room and attach ourselves to technology. So we don't really have a frame of reference for what they're doing. We can't really compare. And we can't go that thing that parents love to do where we say, well, this worked for me, so certainly it'll work for you. So I give myself some peace over this by understanding that it is their way to decompress. If I ever feel like it starts to be too much, I have conversations and have had conversations with the kids, but not from a perspective of like, you shouldn't be doing this. I'll come to them and say, man, I'm really nervous about how much time you're spending on a screen. And they're teenagers, so they'll be like, what? What's the big deal? Like all my friends do this, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll just, hey, here are the statistics. Like it's proven that you're more likely to anxiety. It's proven that you're more likely to have depression. It's proven that you're less likely to try things because you're so afraid of getting anything wrong. You'll be more prone to a fear of failure if you live your life on social media. Like I will sort of talk them through those things. I'm like, man, do you ever go on your phone and then when you get off, you actually feel worse? And they're like, okay, yeah. So great. Okay. This is how we make inroads with, frankly, anybody, but especially with our kids, is you ask questions. You ask questions and you actually allow them to give their truth, to speak their truth, so that you can understand where they're coming from. Because I think the important piece here is for you to also identify what is your goal. Is your goal connection with your son? Is your goal a deeper relationship with your son? Or are you so worried about this because you're worried that a good mom, I'm using air quotes if you guys can't see me, that a good mom wouldn't let her kids spend this much time on a screen? A lot of times we're chasing the wrong thing. We couch it in something else. I want us to spend quality time. Is it that you want to spend quality time, or is it that you don't really think this is what he should be spending all of his time doing? Because you said this boy is going 12 hours a day. There are 40-year-old men who aren't going 12 hours a day. Your son's going 12 hours a day. It sounds like he's putting in a ton of effort. He's getting an education. He's moving his body because he's doing taekwondo. And I also would want to go and be by myself. Like, is he an introvert? Maybe he physically needs to separate himself from other people to fill the well back up so that he can show up the next day and perform the way he needs to. If the goal is connection, is a deeper connection with your son, which I'm sure it is. At the end of the day, we can get clouded by other details, but what we're ultimately hoping for as mamas is that, like, I want to have a great relationship with you. So if that's the case, then it's about quality, not about quantity. Quality. So a couple of things I picked up on. One, you guys, it sounds like when you're with him, you're driving, you have a long commute to drive him to school. That's a fantastic time for connection. My second oldest plays baseball and he has practice 3 times a week. And sometimes the practice is close to me and sometimes it's 40 minutes away. And I can get really grouchy about that 40-minute drive. But I swear that is when we have our best conversations. That's when he asks me things. That's when he tells me stuff that's going on with him or tells me stuff that's going on with his friends. that's when we're by ourselves. We're both facing the same direction, which I always think is really great, especially for boys, that they don't have to like look you in the eye and like have an intimate conversation. You're both facing forward, and we'll just sort of talk about life. So the car can be an incredible opportunity for conversation. It maybe sounds silly, but there's this card game that I love called We're Not Really Strangers. I love We're Not Really Strangers. And it's a card deck. I've played it with my kids. I've played it with my boyfriend, family members, friends. When we have a crew, when we're doing a production and we're all sitting on set, like we have a break, I'll pull those out. They're really fun. You should totally get a deck. But you could pull cards from that for the trip. Give it, hey, Bentley, here's 10 cards. We're going to keep them in the glove compartment. And every day we drive to school, we're pulling a card and we both have to answer truthfully. And it just ends up being this great conversation starter. I think the important thing for a lot of parents, and where we get this wrong sometimes, is that our kids will try and tell us the truth and we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear their truth. One of my kids told me that one of his friends had had sex. Actually, he started by saying, "Mom, if I tell you something, will you keep it to yourself?" And I said, as long as what you tell me doesn't hurt, isn't about someone getting hurt, isn't about someone hurting themselves, isn't something like that, yes, I will keep your confidence. And he said that one of his friends, a teenager, had sex for the first time, had lost his virginity. And everything in me like shriveled up, because I've never had this conversation before, and it's so different than how I was raised. I was raised in such a conservative home, and I was raised with so much shitty belief systems about sex and body and gender and just all of this stuff. And so, of course, there were kids in high school having sex. Of course there were. But I wasn't one of them. And my friends were also nerds, so they weren't one of them. And so it was just really like, I was surprised. But it was such a piece of, like, he was making me a confidant in a way that he hadn't before. And I have tried to create a relationship with all of my kids, but especially with the teenagers, that they are allowed to tell me their truth, and I will not try and make their truth wrong. I feel like parents like pull a fast one. They'll say, I want you to tell me what's going on. Like, if you're ever drunk at a party, no matter what, you call me 2:00 in the morning, no matter what, you call me, I'll come get you, right? But then maybe your kid does get drunk at a party and they call you at 2:00 in the morning, and then they get in trouble and you're pissed and you ground them forever. And look, everybody has a different parenting style. And I'm sure there are some of you who are like, absolutely not. I heard a mom recently talking about that. She was like, absolutely not my son. My son is this, my son is that, my son is perfect, my son da 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 da. And I was like, oh God, this poor kid. This poor kid is already under so much pressure to hit an absolutely unmeetable goal. Like, you have an idea in your mind of who your child is supposed to be, and you will punish them if they don't show up in that way. So he told me this thing, and I was like, were they safe? Like, did they use I don't know. And he's like, yeah, Mom, of course. Like, they're not dumb, like teenagers, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It's whatever. And I had a lot of thoughts and feelings about teenagers having sex with each other and how scary that is and how, like, all the things. But him admitting that to me gave us an incredible opportunity to have a conversation. And we have talked about sex so many times, but I think that was the first time that we've had a conversation about, okay, well, how old do you think is appropriate to do that? And what is a reason why you would, it was a very honest conversation. And I was really proud of him for telling me the truth and for wanting to talk to me about that. That being said, if we want our kids' truth, we can't use it to gaslight them. Gaslighting is when someone tells you their truth and you're like, that's not true. That's not real. That's not how good girls behave. That's not that's not that's not the boy I raised. That's not the, we make them feel wrong for what they feel, which is going to cause all kinds of emotional harm, but is also going to ensure that they never speak to us again. The way to get a deeper relationship with your teenagers is through conversation. And that conversation has to allow for honesty on both sides, right? So like I told him, I was like, well, this super freaks me out. And here's all the reasons this scares me. And here's all the reasons that I think this is inappropriate. But I also am not in control of other human beings. So my advice there is try and have more deep conversations with your child. And that often looks like asking a question and then shutting up. And then just being quiet and listening to what they have to say. Another another great thing that I've done with teenagers, it's like probably one of the things that makes me proudest as a mom is I host a dinner, usually once a month, usually on a full moon. I host a dinner for my teenagers and their friends. And that ends up being a whole other layer. You get to watch them interact with other people. You get to hear what's going on with their friends. Like you get to then, a friend will be like, oh, and then this girl was mean and then she did. I'm like, okay, well, why was that mean? And can you think of times in your life where you probably didn't act the best? And why might that have happened? And like, it just ends up being such a beautiful thing. I also think I want to be the house that the teenagers want to come to. I want to supply all the food, have the space, have the opportunity so the teenagers want to hang out at my house. Because if they're hanging out at my house, they're not out doing something stupid, right? One of my sons, blessed, has a group of friends who are such good kids, but they're also just dumb. They're just that age. They just do dumb stuff. And this is like months ago. And I said, hey, we're going to go see, I think it was like Puss in Boots or something. We're going to go see Puss in Boots. The whole family's going to go. We go to the movies a lot as a family. So we're going to go see Puss in Boots. And he's like, I'm cool. I'm cool. And I was like, what? Because even though they're teenagers, they'll still go see an animated movie. Don't tell their friends, God forbid. So he's like, I'm cool. And I'm like, no, man, it's a family. We're going to go to the movie theater. And he's like, no, I think I'm fine. I'm not really feeling the movies. I'm like kind of tired and, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what is going on? What are you talking about? Cause I could just tell he was being cagey. I'm like, what's your deal? And he's like, okay, I'm kind of banned from the movie theater. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And y'all, I never got in trouble as I ever. So I'm like, oh my word, what's going on? I'm like, what do you mean you're banned from the movie theater? He's like, well, the last time we went in there, my friend was in the lobby jumping on a pogo stick. And they told us we can't come back. First of all, where'd you get a pogo stick? This is my number one question. Where do y'all find a pogo stick near the movie theater? Secondly, some poor kid, the manager of that movie theater is like 17 years old, like 5 seconds older than these people, who had to come and tell you to stop being dumb and get out of his lobby. You got banned from the movie theater. We live in the country, bro. There's nothing to do around here. If you get banned from the movie theater, that's it. There goes your social life. You have nothing because you want to jump on a pogo stick. I ended up talking to this boy's mom about this. And honestly, we were cackling. We were like, these idiots. Where a pogo stick? Why not? Do you have any other old school toys you want to bring into the mix? You got a hula hoop you want to do? Got some old school roller skates? Dummy. Anyway. Having your son's friends join you in things. On first glance, it seems like it would be less of a connection for the two of you, but actually it ends up being a way for you to go deeper. It's really hard to be a mama. And it's really fucking hard to be a single mom. even if you have a co-parent, is so very difficult. And you're a working mom and you're getting it done, and we can all hear how hard you're trying. The fact that you are trying this hard, that you're worried about this, means that you're doing a really good job. And I doubt that someone said that to you recently. You're doing a really good job as a mama. So give yourself grace. Maybe sometimes when he's in his room being a teenager, you take a bath, you take a nap, you read a good book, you watch a rom-com, you go on a run, you do something for yourself. He's in the room, he's doing something for himself. So maybe you don't have to feel so much guilt about it. Maybe you use this as an opportunity to do something for yourself. Last piece of advice. Ask your son what he thinks. Ask him what he thinks. Hey, buddy, I worry a lot about this because we have a little amount of time together, and I just feel like I miss you. I feel like I want more connection. I want us to be closer, and see what he says. Is there anything that we can do together that you feel like you would really dig? Or maybe we haven't tried it yet. Or are there things that we do that you really love and I don't know about it? Ask him how you can be closer. I saw this thing once for business. There was a leader who asked the members of his team to tell him how they were doing on a scale from 1 to 10. And, okay, give me honest feedback. How am I doing as a boss on a scale of 1 to 10? How am I doing? And they would give him the number, and he'd be like, okay, what do I have to do to get to 10? And I loved this idea. So I did it with my kids. And I went around, and they all sort of like giggled, and they're like, what, Mom? Like, you're great. And I'm like, no, be real. On a scale of 1 to 10, how am I doing? And one of them gave me a 10, which is my oldest. And I'm close to all my kids, but I'm very close to my oldest. So I was like, honestly, even if I wasn't at a 10, maybe he wouldn't tell me. So I asked the other 3. Well, Noah's not old enough, but the 2 other boys both gave me a 9. And I was like, okay. And they were like, felt sort of nervous. But the moment that I said, what can I do to get to a 10? Their eyes lit up. Like their whole energy changed. It was really beautiful. Because at least from my perspective, the look on their face was like, oh, she cares. She cares what I think about how she's doing. And I remember my 10-year-old said that he wanted me to watch more. Like, he loves when we watch movies, or he loves when we do things together. And he was like, I want to do that more. I love when we do that. And I'm like, okay, great. That's so easy. And then the 14-year-old said he liked, like, when we do things, like when we go, both the love languages here are quality time, by the way. So he said, like, when we go out to dinner, when we go to a restaurant, when like I plan a thing that he and I get to do together, that makes him feel really loved. Y'all, those are the easiest things. You're telling me that all I got to do for you to feel more love is the simplest stuff in the world? Okay, done. What if the connection that you're looking for with your son, for anyone listening, with your partner, with your parents, with your best friend, with your sister, with your coworkers, what if the connection you're looking for is actually way easier to get than you think? What if you just ask? Cindy, I really appreciate the question, and I appreciate your vulnerability. And I love that you went to Rise Florida. That was such a special group. I miss the Rise girls. Someday we'll all be back together again. Guys, that's today's episode of Ask Rach. Thanks for Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for talking to me. If you have a question, and I feel like you must, you're going to call 737-400-4626. Leave it anonymously, leave it with your name, but I'd love to make this show about you and what you are interested in talking about, so let me know how I can help. I will be back soon with more information, and until then, remember, I love you, and I'm rooting for you. The hormone surge I get post-period feels like depression. And I'm sure that if someone did more research, that they could track the way we feel with what hormone